Hey folks, it's time for the quote of the day, and today we're going to be quoting a very influential philosopher. Now, that being said, this will be a very quick kind of dive into philosophy. There's no possible way that I can give you all the information that you necessarily would need to have to go forward into the world with a complete understanding of what this is all about. But I'm going to give you basically a very shortened, uh, conversational type of understanding of it. Today we're quoting a gentleman by the name of Isaiah Berlin. Now, this is oftentimes when I talk about philosophy and things like that, people have this notion of like, well, he's quoting somebody from fucking Aristotle or Socrates, or they think of Nietzsche and stuff like that. They think of people that are relatively old. But no, Isaiah Berlin died in like 97. Like, so this is a guy that has lived in your lifetime more than likely. So this isn't; these aren't old concepts. This is a new understanding of philosophy, at least relatively new, that is apropos to today, and is important to understand. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I know a lot about Isaiah Berlin's life. I really don't know much about him as a man. I encountered him through reading, I would say probably about, I don't know, 10 years ago. And it was honestly one of the quotes that I'm going to use today. Well, the quote I'm going to use today, but it was reading that quote that led me to him and led me to read a little bit about some of the things that he had said. And that's how I know anything about him at all. He is a very influential philosopher, but about a topic that a lot of people tend to not think about, which when I get to that, you're going to be like, why don't more people think about this? Isaiah Berlin's claim to fame is understanding and discussing concepts of freedom and liberty, something that a lot of people take for granted. A lot of people don't understand it. And that's we're going to get into this a little bit. So stay with me because I think that there's some important concepts. Again, I can't give you the in-depth like deep dive into it that you really would want to have to be able to carry this conversation or to be able to really form an educated opinion on this. I can't do that in a 10-minute video. But I can give you, just some basic stuff. Now, Isaiah Berlin lived through, what happened in Germany, which I'm afraid to say on the app anymore. What happened in Germany? He lived through kind of the Marxist revolution and things like that. He understood a lot of these things that were happening in history because he lived through aspects of them. He understood, and now I should mention the fact that he was born in Russia, and then his family and him moved to England. So he was schooled and raised with an English sensibility, but he knew his family's history in Russia, and he knew what was happening there, and then he got to watch firsthand what was happening in Germany. So he had a very in-depth understanding of what totalitarianism looked like on really both sides. When you have fascistic totalitarianism, and then on the other side you have essentially communistic totalitarianism. And he saw this. He understood this at a a lived experience level, and this really formed and shaped a question and really an understanding from that point in time, because he saw these kind of competing ideologies, and he said, well, how can they both talk about freedom? How that they're literally both selling these ideas of freedom. If you were in Germany, which was a fascistic regime, a totalitarian regime, but you were German, then you were living the high life, right? You were feeling good about it. You could just watch Schindler's List to know that that's true. If you fit in with the status quo, if you were one of the good ones, right? Like, you were living good. Your country was raking in money, ill-gotten gains, and you were feeling good about it. You could just, completely discard any sort of, nuanced discussion about right and wrong, because you're living the life that really honestly we should have been living in America all these times. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of this, freedom, as long as you do it the way they tell you to. Freedom as long as you do it the way they tell you to, right? And then on the other side of that is really kind of more of the same. Is you have this freedom of complete and total expression, but you also are free from the ability to actually make anything happen in your life, right? Like, you don't have any money, you don't have any stance in society, you don't have any way of actually making your dreams come true. Now, flash forwarding a little bit, I'm gonna give you this before I run out of time. Um, President Roosevelt, FDR, put forward at one point in time four freedoms that he believed that everyone in America should have, and these four freedoms are a very, very good example of what Isaiah talked about. He puts forward these ideas of positive and negative liberty, and you get this example here of both sides. Okay, so you have, um, I'm trying to remember what they are now. Freedom of speech, and freedom of religion, freedom to worship. These are the first two freedoms that FDR puts forward as, everybody should have these. Now, these are the negative. Now, you have to kind of divorce the idea that negative necessarily means bad, right? Negative and positive, right? Think about like electrons and protons, that kind of thing, like negative and positive. So it's not a bad thing. It just is. The idea of being freedom from outside exertion, outside interference, is what the negative freedom is. And you are free to do the things like in the Constitution and things like that. Those are freedoms. But the positive freedoms that the FDR talked about were the freedom from want and the freedom from fear. So you have these ideas of, you shouldn't live wanting for something, because how can you want for something and still pursue happiness, right? Like it's literally getting in the way of the basic idea of what America was founded on: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? So when you really approach it from this understanding that FDR breaks these into these two different things, but they were in one idea, you really have an understanding that to truly express liberty and freedom, you need to have a melding of both negative and positive together. And all too often throughout history, when you have these kind of totalitarian ways of thinking, they come with this idea that, well, positive is right. Like we should be free from want and free from fear. We should have everything. We should be able to do and express, and that sounds really great. That does. It sounds wonderful, but at the same time, then you are infringing upon someone else's. Like, for that to happen, you need to have wealth redistribution. You need to have an understanding, and then you start, well, okay, well, there shouldn't be billionaires. Of course, we all agree on that, but there are people that actually achieve their, wealth and things like that, kind of pulling up their bootstraps way of thinking, and then maybe never going to be. There's never going to be a billionaire that does that, but there are a few people that have, amassed a decent amount of money. Do you go and you take their money so that other people can live better? And isn't that infringing upon their rights and their freedom a little bit if they've gotten there, without exploiting other people, which has happened plenty of times in history? You start to get to this idea and understanding that it has to be somewhere in the middle, that neither side is actually right. Now, right now, in this point in history, we need, more of the positive liberty than we do of the negative liberty, because we've seen where that goes. We're in that right now. But we need positive liberty to move us out of that. And then we can kind of recenter ourselves. Now, as far as the quote goes, again, this is a quote, the only one of the quotes that I first read from him, and one that I absolutely 100% believe in with all of my heart. Isaiah Berlin once said, "True knowledge is knowledge of why things are as they are, and not merely what they are." True knowledge is knowledge of why things are the way they are, and not merely what they are. The why is where you actually begin to understand. The understanding of, oh, we do this because of this tradition that comes from this, and then it goes to here and this, and following the footsteps of why we do the things we do, why we are the way we are, why we think the way we think, will lead you to an understanding and the ability to then break that chain, to break that cycle. That is power. Because if you just understand things and say things like, well, it is what it is, which I'm guilty of saying all the time myself, if you just accept things for what they are and just say, this is what is there, then you're not truly understanding how you arrived where you are, and you'll never be able to get back. Happy birthday to Isaiah Berlin. And to the rest of you, take care of yourself. Take care of others. I'll talk to you soon.